All right. Welcome to Expert Speaker Podcast. We are here with wholesaling expert Theresa Beneteau. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Majeed.
Real estate wholesaling. What is real estate wholesaling?
Real estate wholesaling is simply putting a property under contract and selling that contract and getting paid.
Okay. And that means I could see a house that's listed for sale, or maybe it's not listed for sale. I make an offer, which is like a contract. They accept the offer. And now, with this accepted offer, I can sell that accepted offer to someone else who is going to take that offer and buy the property. Or perhaps I'm going to assign the offer to this other person. They buy the property and I make money.
That's correct. Yes.
Got it. Well, Teresa, when I first moved to Canada in 2008, I had no money and no work visa. I was not able to legally be employed. And I saw this infomercial that said, buy real estate with no money down. And I thought, no money. That's perfect. That's just like me. And I found out all these ways to do this creative financing where you end up buying a property with no money down. But little did I know, I had to get the credit check and I had to get the mortgage and I had to work with the lawyer and I had to find the rental people. Like I had to find the tenants and I had to manage the property and I had to fix the air conditioner and I had to do some renovations on the bathroom that I was highly unqualified to do. And I learned, oh my gosh, there's just so much to do in real estate. And I had no idea there was such a thing called wholesaling. So now I know through working with you and so many other real estate investors that there are just so many ways to make money in real estate. So tell me, how did you discover this wholesaling and why is it the one thing that you've planted your flag and said, this is the thing, I'm going to write the book about it, I'm going to help other people do it. Wholesaling is the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Majeed, really, my story starts back in 1988. And I bought my first property. My parents, so I did it the traditional way, right? Is I was working two full-time jobs. My parents loaned me the down payment. I bought my first house. I moved into that house and I really thought that I had the world, by the ankles. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Look at the freedom I have. I can do what I want when I want. This is great. I don't live at home anymore. And then 30 days into it, the first of the month come up again. Next thing you know, the mortgage payment is coming out and the taxes are coming out and the gas and the hydro and the hot water tank rental. Yes, in Canada, we have hot water tank rentals. So there was all these challenges that all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, like, what am I doing wrong? And then next thing you know, I'm noticing that my grass needed to be cut. And all I had to cut my grass was a pair of scissors. And I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? Right? Where do I get the money now for a lawnmower? And I have to actually push that lawnmower. So I was really down on myself because I'm looking at some of my friends. I mean, at 20 years old, some people are out partying. I'm not. Right here, I was 20 years old. I'm doing the right thing, so I'm thinking. And I seen the same infomercials back in the 80s, Majid. No money down, get into real estate, and Tom Vu in the United States, like he was one of the first people I ever listened to with real estate when I was 20. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? So literally, I went and I looked through the newspaper because that's what we had way back in the day. We didn't have this thing called the internet. And so I went in the newspaper. I found this realtor that had some open house ads. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to give this realtor a call and I'm just going to tell him kind of like what the problem is. Because now does it mean I'm going to lose my house? Do I have to sell my house? Am I moving in my parents' basement? What's going to happen to me? So anyway, I reached out to Rick, and Rick showed up at my house. And I remember he pulls in the driveway and he's driving this white sports car. And I was like, oh my goodness, already feeling intimidated, right? Because I had my car had two colors, gray and rust. And
Uh-huh.
here's his car. And so anyway, he pulls up, so he comes to the door and and he's sitting at my kitchen table and and he's dressed sharp, right? He's got the brown suit on and the white collared shirt. And I'm sitting at the kids' table. I've got my baseball cap on, I've got a t-shirt, my sweatpants, And I'm kind of feeling a little, power shift authority thing going on here. And he was about 18 years older than I was at the time. So he's talking, and honest to goodness, Majid, all I could hear was womp, 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 like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? And he's talking about my options and what I can do. And I really can't hear anything. And the only voices in my head were, what am I doing wrong? Why can everybody else make money in real estate and I can't? So I mustered up the courage. I kind of took a big gulp, right? And my eyes were welling up at this point because I'm looking at it. I said, Rick, I said, look, I said, what have I done wrong? I said, I'm 20 years old. I'm not partying. I save my money to the best of my ability. I've got my first house. Most people around me don't even own a house, right? Interest rates at that time were creeping up to around 11 and three quarter percent. I'd already seen them at 21 and three quarter percent. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And so Rick, he leans into the conversation, right? And he's, and I could see, his hands like on the table, and he leans into me, and I can see his Rolex watch. And that was a big thing back then. And you see the bling bling, right? And and he leans into me and he goes, Teresa, he said, have you ever heard of wholesaling? And I'm like, wholesaling? I said, what? You want me to take on another job? Like I'm going to wholesale groceries? Like, I'm like, I already work two full-time jobs. Like, what are you talking about? Right? I thought he lost his mind. And he says, no, no, no. He goes, wholesaling real estate. He said, you don't need a mortgage. You don't need a down payment. And he says, and you can do multiple of these deals, anytime that you want because you don't have to qualify. And so I leaned into him, and honest to goodness, I kind of looked both ways. I looked out my window to make sure no one could see. And I leans into him and I goes, Rick, I said, be honest with me. I said, is this legal? And he starts to laugh and he goes, yes, Teresa. He goes, of course it's legal. He says, I've been doing it for years. He said, he says, it's putting an offer in on a property, getting it under contract, selling that contract and getting paid. And really at that moment, I mean, I was hooked. Like I looked at him and I said, all right, like you have to teach me everything you know. And he said, all right, but he says, I got a few conditions for you. And I said, okay. I said, anything, like just, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm a sponge. And he said, first of all, you're going to have to invest in yourself. And I said, well, I already know that I can invest in me because I already know I'm working hard. And he said, second thing is he says, you're gonna realize, he said, money isn't gonna rain down on you. You're not just all of a sudden gonna make one call, go see one place, money's gonna hit your bank account and you're gonna be rich. And he said, and I said, okay, I said, I get that. It's not a get rich quick scheme. He says, Teresa, if it was, it would be illegal. And I'm like, okay, fair. And then he said, the third thing, he says, the most important thing I want you to promise me. And I'm like, sure, Rick, what is it? And he looked at me and he said, don't quit on yourself. Don't quit before the money happens. And I looked at him and I said, all right. I said, what do I got to do? Like, fine, I'll mentor you. And that's what he did. He literally took me under his wing. He taught me everything, everything that he knew about this business. And I've literally, because of that moment, because of a decision that I made during one of the happiest, lowest times of my life, almost combined into one with my first house, and literally taking that experience, trusting one other person, grabbing onto him like he was a life preserver, and saying, teach me, mentor me, tell me what I need to do, and following his system. And that was the freedom for me of what it's allowed me to do from being 20 years old back then to 57 now. And this is what I want to really bring to people because you're going to have different seasons
So
in your life.
you've been doing wholesaling for 37 years?
Yes, I have.
Holy moly. Okay, so let me just back up a little bit. So this real estate agent pulls up in your driveway in a white sports car and says, "Have you thought about wholesaling? Because you don't need to qualify."
Yeah.
And now at that point, were you owning the house that you lived in?
Yeah, I bought my first house, but I was on the verge of losing it because I
Okay.
was broke now.
You
Right?
couldn't
I
afford you
realized
couldn't
very
afford
quickly.
a lawnmower.
Nothing.
Got it.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first ever wholesale deal and how long did it take you to get one done and how much money did you make on that one?
So my first one was $7,500, and we did that in 60 days.
Oh my God. And that's 37 years ago ish.
Yes, yes.
So from the day you said, teach me how to wholesale to the day you got the deal done was 60 days.
60 days from that moment that we went completely gangbusters. Ads in the paper. I was reaching out. I was making phone calls. I was doing walkthroughs. I was hardly sleeping. I'll be honest. I was so driven by, what he said and the possibility that I seen an opening and I just ran for it.
And 7,500 bucks adjusted to today's dollars must be triple that.
Oh, equivalent today would probably be close to about $30,000 today.
Right, right, right. Okay. So
Yeah,
quadruple.
yeah.
So, so is that a typical payout on a wholesale these days, like 30,000?
So some of them I've done $5,000 deals because I mean at the end of the day I'd rather get something than nothing. I have done deals that I've got the $30,000. I've done deals that I've made $55,000 and more. So it really depends on the property. It depends on the person's motivation. It depends on the market. Because face it, I mean, in 37 years, I've been through 5 recessions and I've been through COVID. So every market is different. Every timing of the market is different. Whether our, I believe three things, Majeed. We're either in a recession, we just got out of a recession, or we're about to go in a recession.
Okay, that's
That's
sounds
what I've
true.
come to believe because of how many dips and tips that I've had to do in this real estate business. Yes.
Okay. And does your strategy change much in those three phases?
No, everything stays the same. The things where I pivot is where are the buyers. And that's the ticket, is that my students are in North America, and the one thing that I do mentor on is identifying the right market. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in Canada and you want to do this in the US, you can do that. If you're an American, you want to do this in Canada, you can do that. So you can cross border, you can sideboard, or you can do whatever you want. It's a matter of where are the buyers? Because if you go where no one's buying, you're not going to be able to sell the contract because no one's going to buy the contract. So the
Okay.
strategy has always stayed the same, where what's going on in the market? How are we doing this?
Uh-huh.
And then you can even get more creative. So I would say a wholesaling 102 tip is I made $35,000 on another deal. However, with that particular deal, I managed to make the first bit of money. I made nothing on the top. We did a 7-year contract and I wholesaled it, made $35,000 on the sale in the 7-year period with zero money, controlling the property. I had a tenant and the property was brand new. There was literally no repairs, no maintenance in a down market. So I made myself be the buyer, but I never closed on the transaction. I wholesaled it out later down the road at the 7-year mark when the market came up, and I made $35,000 on the exit.
Very good. Okay. So this works anywhere in North America,
Yes,
USA, all across
yes,
Canada.
yes. Anywhere where wholesaling is legal, yes,
And you don't just want to get a property under contract, you want to get a really good deal under contract.
100%. Yes.
So how do you get a really good deal? How do you get a seller to agree to a really good deal so that you can say, okay, I got such a good deal, I know someone's going to pay me for it. Because no one's going to pay you for a bad deal under contract.
That's right. That's right. So
Okay.
first thing, Majid, is I would, when you ask the question of how do I get a seller to, you know, agree to a good deal? Well, first of all, I'll never get them to agree to a good deal. What gets them in a position of it being a good deal is their motivation. Is that when here's a story for you, is that I got this phone call from this distressed seller, and he said to me, he said, look, he said, I'm in a distressed situation. He says, I need to sell my property by December 15th. And I said, okay. And he said, Teresa, he says, this is what happened. He said, I had a buyer. The buyer was supposed to buy my property. He said, now they can't get the financing. He said, we're now moving into a new home. And he said, now what's going to happen? He says, literally, my family's packed in the U-Haul truck right down to the Christmas tree. And he said, if I don't sell my property by December 15th, he said, not only are our kids not going to have a Christmas, he said, I'm going to be sued. So I said to him, I said, well, I said, you do realize today is December 11th, right?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
And he said, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, how much do you want for the property? And he said, $420,000. And I said, okay. I said, let me make a phone call. So now, just for anyone new listening, it's not just that I picked up the phone and called a random stranger or went on Facebook Marketplace looking for a buyer. I called someone that is seasoned, who has cash, and I knew would pull the trigger quickly if it was going to be a good deal. So I called this buyer up and I said, look, I have a property. I said, here's my question. I asked him, I said, how much money can you wire to your lawyer tomorrow morning by 10 a.m.? And he said, $317,000. He said, what do you
Okay.
got? I said, I don't know yet, but I said, let me call you back. I called the seller up and I said, okay, I said, I can make this deal happen for December 15th for $317,000. The seller said, but I want 420. And I said, if you wanted 420, you should have called me 4 months ago. I said, you've given me 4 days to solve your problem so that your family can have Christmas and you're not getting sued. And I said, I've just solved your problem if you agree to 317. He said, fine, I'll take it. Now, someone might say to me, well, Theresa, if you bought it for 317 and you gave it to your buyer for 317, how did you make money? This is where it gets even more interesting. I love wholesaling. So I said to the buyer, I said, look, buyer, I called the buyer back. I said, all right, this deal's closing on Friday, December 15th. I said, we got to get this thing going. And he said, okay, well, he says, I'm on vacation right now. I'm back next week. Can I see it? And I said, not before the closing. You can't. There's not enough time. And then he said, well, let me get an inspector. I said, you're not going to get an inspector in there. I said, you've got 4 days. I said, I says, there's no time for an inspection. He said, so you want $317,000 sight unseen? I said, yes, I do. And he's like, okay. And I said to him, I said, look, I said, I don't know what this deal is worth. I do not, all I know is he had originally sold it for 420. I said, so all I know is you're getting it for 317. So I know there should be a profit. There should be. I don't know how much that profit is. So I said, I'll tell you what, this is what we're going to do. I said, you buy the property. I'm not going to be the middle person because when I'm going to do a wholesale deal, I get my lawyer involved, which creates legal fees. So I said, I'm going to keep my cost to zero. I'm going to put you directly in contact with the seller. The offer is going to go from the seller to you. That because here's another trick, Majeed. Try to find a lawyer in December. It's easier to find a needle in a haystack.
Mm.
Okay, they start leaving in November. They don't like closings in December. So the odds of finding a lawyer for the buyer and me in such a short period of time was, again, we only had 4 days, and it was the evening of the December 11th. So I went ahead and I said, okay, I says, we're going to join these two right away, the buyer and the seller. So I said to the buyer, I said, look, I said, what's your intention with this property? He said, Theresa, he said, I'm going to close on it on the 15th. As soon as my realtor can go out, I'm listing it and putting it right back up for sale. I'm not doing any work. I'm not getting a tenant. I'm leaving it empty. I want to do nothing. He says, even if I can go in and just make 10 grand, fine, it's Christmas money. Okay. So I said, okay, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I said, whatever you sell the property for, whatever your net profit is, I said, I want half your net profit. I said, I get nothing right now whenever you sell it down the line. 136 days later, it closed. He marketed the property, listed the property. It sold in the spring because where the location was, you could only sell it in the spring. In the spring, and he went ahead and his net profit was $110,000. I made $55,000 on a 30, thank you, on a 30-minute conversation with the seller joined the two with a lawyer, and literally waited for my check to be in the mail. I have not seen the property. I've not met the seller in person. Nothing. I had zero to do with that property whatsoever, and that was 100% remote.
And who was the listing agent on that property? Not you.
No, I'm not a realtor. So I was not, I didn't list the property or anything. So the
Amazing.
buyer got his own realtor to list the property after it was closed. Because when it came to me, it was seller to me. There was no
Good,
real estate agent or
good.
anything involved.
So the story sounds to me like you were very good at helping the buyer see that you were making him a solution, making him a solution to his problem so he could have Christmas and not get sued, as you put it. Creating $100,000 spread approximately between what the likely value of the property is and the purchase price, which is why that deal was so valuable. And you were clever enough to make a deal with the buyer. Instead of asking for five or ten or $15,000, you said, let's remove the risk and just split the profits, remove the costs and split the profits. Um, I'm sure they're not all that fun and exciting, but wow, if that's not worth learning, because a lot of people would love $55,000 and trade an entire year of their life working away at a job that they probably don't like. And how many of those deals can you do in a year?
As many as you want.
As many as you want. How nice. So you wrote the book, Insta Wholesaler. Congratulations. Tell us about the book.
So again, fast forward is that, yeah, there's modern technology and there's AI and I'm sure you could go right now on AI. I love ChatGPT. You could probably punch in and say, you know what, write me a book, and it could probably spit you out a 200-page book in probably 5 minutes or less. And I can tell you that I didn't take the easy route. My biggest thing was when I sat down, literally computer to keyboard, because it wasn't pen to paper, is literally I wanted to put my knowledge, I wanted to put my experiences, I wanted to share the pros, we'll say, of getting into this, and then the cons, because you've got to find those deals. And I really wanted to paint a realistic picture. Like, as much as I'm talking about the $55,000 one, there was one that right down to the wire, I was lucky to make $5,000 because of how it went. And then there's other ones, we can work that hard and all of a sudden it comes apart at the last minute. You don't make any money at all, right? I'm just saying is these are the things of what's possible. So I'm not going to sit here and tell, I'm not doing a bait and switch like, oh, get me as your coach, you'll make $55,000 in 5 minutes. No, but I am going to say to you, is it possible? Yes, it is. And that's what I poured into my book, is that I literally condensed 35 years of my knowledge into the book. It took me 10 months to write my book, um, between actually producing it, typing it out, putting that in there, and then hiring someone to tweak it a little bit. And then originally they were like, you've got to add more to it because and this is what I learned through the book, was that it really made me break it down to someone who has no idea what wholesaling is. Like, if you go to some people right now and say, hey, have you heard of wholesaling? They think Costco,
Right.
right? Most do. And so it was really breaking it down in that language and distilling it even more. And where I got the Insta part is everybody's Insta something. We're Insta pot, we're Instagram, right? We want things that are quick. And the people that I mean, I can help anyone that wants to get mentored by me and coached by me, and I'm not disputing that. Where my niche is, where I love to live, 18 to 30-year-olds. And the reason being is that I was 20 when I got into this. And when I see the young minds, and I mean, I want to be a Rick. I want to be able to give I mean, this gentleman has long passed. He's passed away a lot, years and years ago now. But I took what he taught me and I literally turned it into a book. I turned it into a step by step, a simple process to literally, getting the book, getting into my mentorship programs, literally offering one-on-one coaching, group coaching. So having all these opportunities that when he taught me, it was one-on-one, And back in the day, it wasn't sexy yet. It wasn't popular yet. So everything was the grind. Everything was you had to convince. I had to convince buyers. I had to convince and convince. So it's over the years now where it's become knowledge, right? And now there's a little bit more movement. There's buyers. I mean, so literally taking I did it the hard way, guys, and I really want to say this to the listeners, Majid, is I did it with blood, sweat, and tears and no internet and a corded phone, right? No cell phone. I mean,
Yeah.
that was how I did it. We had an MLS book, a multiple listing service book that
A
was this
book.
a
Oh,
book
I
that
never
had
knew there was a book.
yes, there was a multiple listing service of all the listings of properties that were for sale. And I worked midnights as a security guard. And in between my rounds, I would memorize this book and I would analyze deals and analyze deals and analyze deals. And by the time I could even get an offer in, it's a book. It doesn't update like the internet, right? So guess
Right.
what? All of a sudden it's gone. So I
Mm-hmm.
could have spent a week analyzing something. So literally taking the hard way of doing it, right? The caveman way of doing this business and bringing it into now, leveraging technology, leveraging chat GPT, leveraging Facebook. Like, are you kidding me right now? It's like printing money. And I'm not making that as a disclaimer, but I'm saying you know, is that you can literally do this remotely. Like literally what COVID did, Majid, it's such a it was really painful. There was a lot of deaths. My mother-in-law passed away. My sister-in-law passed away. There's traumatic events that went on through COVID. However, the good that came out of it is that it got us to be able to think remotely. To all of a sudden now you can expand because at one time I just would have done wholesaling in my backyard. And I literally mean my backyard, right? 5 minutes from where I live. And I've been able to take this and be into two countries with it. So this is what the power of remote has given. This is what the power of, being unified at a whole different platform because COVID forced us to do that. COVID forced us to stay in our houses, do things that were sight unseen, and have very little contact with each other. And pivoting, like I've been at this 37 years. However, yes, I've taken that into getting into fix and flips. I've taken that into buying and holding properties. I've taken that into becoming a passive investor. I've taken the springboard of wholesaling and I've created an empire out of it, just out of
And
this little moment, right?
Teresa, when you see your students now, I know some of your students probably not all of them are as driven as you were, but the ones who are driven, who can follow your system, how long is it taking them to get their first wholesale under contract?
60 days. 60 days. If they're following it the way that I've structured it to do, within 60 days they're going to have something under contract.
Well, I think this is great for any ambitious person, and I know so much wealth is made in real estate. And what's cool about what you're doing is it gets people to be so curious and so clever and creative. And what I love about investing in real estate, when I first came to Canada, so I learned everything about how houses work, about what to look for in the roof, and there's a crack in the foundation, and this furnace is running on gas and not electric, and this thing needs to be replaced. I learned so much about homes. I learned about finance, and so it's a very creative field to be in, and I think that's ultimately what creates the value is the creativity. Like you had the idea of I can solve this guy's problem like tonight. Get this. I know a guy who can wire a lot of money real fast. Let me call him. And uh creating such a win-win-win. That's a creativity. That's not just hard work. You're a hard worker, but you're a creative person too. And
Yes.
so I think this is good for hard workers. It's good for creative people. It's good for ambitious people. So for people who want to learn from you, how do they get the book and how do they hire you to coach them?
So instawholesaler.com is where you would go. You can go to my website if you want to book a strategy session with me. It's www.theresabeneteau.com, Theresa, Beneteau, Beneteau.com. Reach out to me. Let's book a call. Let's find out where you are right now. Where are you and where do you want to go? How long do you have before you want to get there? A lot of people come to me because they don't want to be at the 9 to 5 anymore. I don't want to, I never want to go back to a 9 to 5. To me, that would be punishment. And that's been my drive. So if you've got something burning inside of you and you just feel that, there's got to be some way out there, you know what? Let's have a conversation. Is that if you've got a strong why and you've got a passion of, how your life has to change. Maybe you're hearing this right now and you're like, you know what? Not one more minute, not one more second. I can't take one more day at this job. I can't take one more moment in what's going on in my financial life, and I want to have financial control. Then you know what? Let's book a call. Let's make something happen, and I guarantee results.
All right. There you heard it. Yeah, $55,000 payday would change a lot of people's mood, or
100%.
20,000 or 5,000.
That's right.
And it's solving people's problems. It's solving sellers' problems. It's solving buyers' problems who are looking for the good deals. Very good. All right, contact Theresa if you'd like to work with her directly. Go buy her book, read her book, and happy wholesaling, happy real estate investing. Thank you for joining us here on the Expert Speaker Podcast, Theresa Beneteau. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Majeed.